Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are back for season 4, episode 6 of our science fiction season.
Mm-hmm. Getting closer to the much more modern times and kind of getting close to the end of the season.
I know. It's rolling on by.
Mm-hmm. This one went by faster than others.
Maybe because we just took such a long break beforehand that I was like, oh my gosh, we're never going to do a podcast again. Like, it's been so long. We were so busy all fall. And then we started rolling, and it was just over and over and over again. But it's been fun. Yeah. So much fun.
Speaking of breaks and everything, and going back to our earlier seasons, we have some podcast business to talk about tonight.
I was going to look it up beforehand. I want to say it's season 1, episode 4. Or
somewhere around there.
Somewhere between like 4 and 6.
Definitely season 1. Blazing Saddles turns 50 years today, the night we're recording this. Not the night that this podcast will come out, but close enough. 50 years off by a couple of days.
It's definitely a 50-year-old movie. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Definitely some things that aged a little, not that great. Some things that were still funny. But if you haven't seen that episode, I recommend going back and checking out season 1.
It is
episode
a ride.
Something about Blazing Saddles.
Yes. I think I'm still recovering from Blazing Saddles.
I just love that you knew absolutely nothing going into it.
I mean, I will never forget. I'm like changing our daughter's diaper, like in the middle of like momming, and I just get this text, Blazing Saddles ? And I'm like, what the heck is he talking about? And then I was like, for Culture Night? And you were like, yeah. And I was like, well, I've never heard of it, so sure. And then, I was cultured. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. All right. So with that, let's just jump into what we're drinking tonight.
Tonight, we are drinking the 2020 Ducey Vineyards Zinfandel. Feels weird in the 2020s.
I know. Every time we say 2020, I think this is only our second one, but I've had a couple other wines from the 2020s recently, and it feels weird.
Talks about the vineyard itself more than the wine. It does. Okay, it says at the end, this stress helps create the intense and jammy fruit that signifies Ducey fruit.
I was going to say I did get some maybe strawberry or raspberry on the nose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely get their jammy.
Mm-hmm. I smelled the cork when I opened it, and it definitely is a pleasant smell. And I think for so long I was like, oh, Zinfandel is just kind of a wine I write off. But now I'm getting to the point where I'm like, oh, another Zinfandel.
Yeah, get like the raspberry blackberry on there. That's good to taste.
Very jammy, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Very fruity. Definitely the opposite of the very earthy wine we had last week.
Mm-hmm.
Last week.
Kind of had like a little tart, intense flavor right off the bat, and then it kind of melted into the more of the what it smelled like with the jamminess from the blackberry and raspberry. Mm-hmm. But right off the bat, it was kind of an intense flavor there.
Mm-hmm. It's delicious. Mm-hmm. I'm here for the Zinfandels.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, that's not a timid wine. I would say that is a bold wine for sure.
Very good. Okay, so we have opted to skip behind the screens this week because we have a lot of information and stuff, other things, other podcast business to talk about. So right now we are going to skip that and jump right into Slept on It. Last week we watched Back to the Future. And does your rating change after sleeping on it? You rated it a 9.3 and I rated it an 8.9.
Do we want to say whether our rating changes after sleeping on it or now that we've seen or you've seen the whole trilogy? Because in this past week we did watch 2 and 3.
Yes, we just went all in on Back to the Future and it was fantastic. No, I want you to stick to your movie score. Does your rating change after sleeping on the
I don't think so. I think 9.3 still feels right for just part 1.
Yes, I will stick with my 8.9 score, but I was thinking about it when I was putting this outline together earlier today, and I still stand by the 8.9, and I don't think the other movies were better, but I feel like as a collective whole, they're like a 9, 9.5. Which I feel like doesn't make sense because I rated the movie in 8.9, but it's just like when you think about like the thing as a whole and how it all comes together and the full circle of everything. And if you just sit down and watch them all straight through, like what an experience that would be, which we should totally do sometime. I think it's just so well done.
I would say I would rate like number 1, probably a 9.3, number 2 a 9.5, and number 3, maybe like an 8.7.
Yeah. 3 is definitely the weakest, but I have a note about it that I will kind of talk about how my feelings on that kind of change.
So let's jump into your facts next, and then I can talk maybe a little bit more about number 2 if you don't cover that.
Okay. All right. Are you ready for some fact snacks?
Oh, we got a sound effect.
I know. It has been killing me to not tell you about that all day.
When did you find time to put that on there?
I have to go downstairs and set up the podcast stuff, watch the kids.
That's what you're doing down there for so long.
I'm so sneaky. I mean, that took like 3 seconds. I had already had it saved, but do we need to hear it one more time?
Yeah, let's hear it. Fact snacks. All right.
I was like, okay, how do I Google this? I need a chomping sound. So we now have a little sound fact for it because I really feel like fact snacks is a fun play on words, and these are the most shallow of dives, and they're just some fun, quick little nuggets of information. So fact snacks it is. So our first fact snack, I'm going to probably flip that around all the time. So just brace yourself. Our first fact snack for tonight is that the original title for this movie was Spaceman from Pluto.
Well, that's weird.
I feel similarly to that as I feel about A Boy's Life for E.T. But also, quick side note on A Boy's Life, that really, the more I think about it, that really applies to every science fiction movie we've watched this year or this season. Maybe not so much 2001: A Space Odyssey, but Luke Skywalker, A Boy's Life, in the Star Wars, E.T., Elliot, the Terminator, Kyle Reese,
A Man's Life,
yeah, and then what's his face, Marty McFly, A Boy's Life.
Yep, that's just going to be the most lazy name for any movie going forward.
Yep, so that just made me giggle, but Spaceman for Pluto is apparently what this Back to the Future was supposed to be called.
Maybe it was, I wonder, was that the, when Marty is trying to like convince his dad to ask out his mom, and he dresses up as a spaceman, whatever. And
maybe.
Or was that the name of what his dad's novel was or something? It'd be a weak reference, I think, unless it had that more prominently in the original draft.
From what I remember reading, it was something based on the original draft, but it could, and maybe they brought it back around for his dad's book or something. I didn't look too deep, but yeah, just putting that out there. All right. My next note is the opening clock scene. We talked a lot about it in the podcast last week afterwards, of just not only was it impressive that they had to find all those clocks, but how do they even get it to who was in charge of building that and putting that all together. And I did find a little bit of the behind the scenes information about it. It apparently took 20 people to set all of those clocks to be at this exact same time. So I just imagine like all these people running around trying God, exhausting. And then they also had someone underneath the camera with smoke pellets for the toaster,
toast and all that.
Because like the person who was talking about it was like, when you pan this way, we don't want to give it away. So we wanted the smoke to go off at just the right time. So they had someone, I just imagine, this poor person laying under the camera trying to get those to go off. And then similarly, they also had a torch hidden under where the cans of dog food were, because they needed the dog food to be warm so that when it tilted over, it would actually pour out of the cans.
Weird.
So just to think of like all the little things that we didn't even see that helped put all of that together. I feel like I almost need like a good like behind the scenes like 20-minute YouTube video of someone actually describing how they got all those pieces together. I'm sure that it
evolved to get to that point of being like, oh crap, we're gonna have to reset these clocks. Oh, now we need the smoke to come in at this particular time. So you get down here and you do the smoke. Oh, that dog food didn't pour correctly. Next take, we gotta warm it up. So it I'm sure it built up to that over time.
Yeah, I'm sure that that's something that the people that worked on that have stories about. Also, I did see that there were some specific clocks that were actually scripted, of like, we want this exact clock, we want this exact style of clock, and then the other ones were just from the prop department. So just a cool open, and such an interesting scene. I haven't gone back and watched it since we saw it. I'd like to see it again.
Establishes the whole like time-based thing and the ingenuity of Doc trying to get all those things working as like a Rube Goldberg machine to like make him breakfast and whatnot. But I guess also that opening scene establishes that Marty is just not good with time, because he like arrives, he's already pretty late, and then it realizes that he's late after the fact and all that. The kind of whole like drives the whole like time is a weird thing in his life at that point, and then obviously becomes a much bigger factor in his life with time travel.
It's a scene that you could just write off, but when you really sit down and think about it, it really just ties everything together. My next note is the DeLorean. Last week we talked about, or I said something like, I'm shocked the sales didn't go through the roof, but they actually did go up. I mean, it was not an overall successful car, but because of the movie, it was more popular. And similar to Reese's Pieces, they did see a boost in sales with the DeLorean after the movie came out.
I've heard the DeLorean was like just way over heavy and just like not an overall good car. And so
that's what you were talking about last week. Yeah,
I'm sure that this brought sales up, but then everyone was like, but we don't like these.
Yeah, I have this, but never mind.
If I'm rich and I can make it like some sort of like fun prop for my giant car garage, sure. But I'm like, everyday people wanted to drive those around.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would like the experience of opening the door once to say I did it, but I think practically, I feel like that it just doesn't seem practical.
Yeah, I mean, the Tesla Model X has kind of doors like that, but I'm sure they're probably put more engineering into those doors than the DeLorean did, and it probably was very impractical for things like in a tight parking spot.
Okay, my next note is Michael J. Fox. He was actually also filming his show Family Ties at the same time he was filming Back to the Future. So there were times he was just exhausted filming this movie because he was basically working 2 full-time jobs. And there were several occasions where members of the cast and crew had to carry him to bed because he would just like fall asleep on set after filming, which I just think is wild because he doesn't look exhausted. Thank God for hair and makeup and it being filmed in the 80s.
And coffee and everything. So on that same note though, in my research, I found out that he was not originally the actor playing Marty McFly. He was the actor that they originally wanted to play Marty McFly, but he was busy, like you said, with Family Ties. And so they actually filmed all of the 1950s scenes with a different actor, Eric Stoltz. And I think the cast and everything was getting along, pretty well. And it was kind of working out, but the director and I guess Zemeckis just didn't feel like he was giving just quite the vibe that they really wanted from Marty McFly. He was kind of being a little more, I guess, dry and more serious in his take and kind of more playing a more like skeptical role as opposed to, being fully in on all the craziness there. And so they just, in the middle of one day of filming at lunchtime, they were like, actually, Eric's no longer going to be part of the cast. We're going to take a break and we're bringing in Michael J. Fox to play Marty. And everyone was completely shocked. And they had to reshoot all of those 1950s scenes again. And there's actually a couple of clips where they still used some of the original footage from parts where you couldn't see Marty just to kind of, get the best take of what they wanted. But for the most part, like they had to do like a shot by shot, like remake of all of those things that they just already gone through, which seems like a whole lot of work because a whole lot of the movie takes place in that other time period with him.
I feel like that, like those kinds of stories are what make Hollywood so interesting. It's like we filmed this whole movie and it wasn't exactly right. So then we just said, never mind and started all the way over again.
But I wonder how many movies like flopped that if they had just, said, no, we're going to hold out and wait for this person's schedule to clear up. Or even though we filmed these 8 scenes, we realize it's not bad or that it's not good and that we need to switch to a different actor and we need to, retape these things. If those flops would have just suddenly been masterpieces that we, now would talk about or watch on this podcast, but otherwise are gone.
Yeah. I feel like it's such like a hit or miss of whether a movie is going to be crazy. I mean, like Star Wars could have been such a flop, but like the right people got into it and then it just took off. And I feel like there's so much where if just like a little bit was different in society or in the movie, like our pop culture could be completely different.
Yeah. And then I think a lot of times you hear stories about like movies where they did all these insane things or had these crazy strokes of luck or did, this really weird method of, making the movie or promoting it or something. And everyone's like, oh, wow, I can't believe like the geniuses that thought of this. But I'm sure there's thousands of other examples where something like that, was tried or something didn't quite line up exactly as it was. And it was just another, crappy movie or it was, canned halfway through or, just didn't work out because it's so much of it, I think, is just luck and everything just aligning just right.
Yeah. It's so crazy. I never loved movies that much, but the more that we've been doing this and like really watching them and paying attention and watching them consistently and seeing crossovers and stuff, it's all just a mystery and wild and amazing.
Because we've seen other movies where like the composer was fired or basically replaced in post. Just so many things where at any point, no one's job is necessarily, completely safe. And one other note with Michael J. Fox coming in to replace Eric Stoltz is that after he was replaced, apparently Crispin Glover, who plays Marty's dad, was kind of like had his own opinion of like how things should be played and wasn't taking the criticism from the directors and the producers. And he kind of had like an attitude. And then once he realized that no one's job was safe, he realized he needed to kind of clean up his act and say like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and actually do what the director says, because apparently, even though we've already filmed half the movie,
the director is Bob Zemeckis.
Is Zemeckis?
Yeah. I thought I knew he wrote it, but I couldn't remember if he directed it or not. So
anyways, he realized that he needed to, clean up because even though they filmed all these scenes at any point, he could be completely swapped out.
Which, sometimes you need that wake up call. Everybody, not just movie people, like everybody, sometimes you just need that wake up call.
But it didn't clean up his act enough because he was not in the 2 sequels, because apparently he thought he was worth way more than he I guess everyone else thought he was, because he demanded $1 million, which apparently was more than the other actors were getting paid for their roles for this movie. And so they decided to scrap him, and that's why he's kind of so far off in number 2 and number 3. We don't really see him up close, or he's upside down for whatever reason, just because they replaced the actor.
Crazy. Well, replace the actor with Michael J. Fox. Okay, so moving on, my next note is the Hill Valley set was all a set. It was not a real place. It is a full town square that has been built on location in a warehouse, and it was actually originally built in 1948, and has that same town square has been featured in films such as To Kill a Mockingbird, The Gremlins, and Goosebumps 2.
Wow.
So
they Goosebumps too? Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I guess they like slightly redressed things and switched it up a little bit, but it is apparently a famous set.
I mean, I guess it's kind of similar to what we saw with the Inn in Holiday Inn. It's the same as
White Christmas.
Yes.
But I mean, watching it did feel like a film set to me. It didn't feel super like a real town, but
yeah. Because I mean, you don't really see much beyond just that town square or anything like that.
Yeah. So I just thought it was interesting that it's actually something that's been used many times. We talked last week about whether or not there would be an increase in skateboarding accidents following the movie, and I could not find any information about that. There was all these like recall alerts and like stuff that had nothing to do with Back to the Future, but apparently Michael J. Fox did actually know how to skateboard before the movie, and he did not learn specifically for this. He did obviously have a stunt double because that would be crazy, but he did do some of his own skateboarding.
So there's got to be at least some kids that tried to do this and got absolutely messed up trying to ride behind a car. Especially a car who's not participating in the stunt. I
think if this movie was coming out in the age of social media and 24-hour news and like where we are at now, it would probably know more about it. But being in the 80s, I'm sure people are like, oh, they're just kids.
Yeah. Now there would be like a disclaimer before the scene.
Yeah. And do not do this. Okay, and then my next two notes have a little bit more to do with 2 and 3. So the sequels were actually meant to be filmed as one movie, and they had just realized they had so much story to tell that they ended up splitting it into 2. And I think that's kind of where my asterisk of where like I don't think the third movie is great, but I think of like when you think about, and then now that we mentioned today, watching like all 3 of them back to back, or just watching 2 and 3 back to back, it's like such an interesting story to go forward in time and way backwards in time, and just that whole complete time travel experience I think is really cool. Yeah.
I think it's weird that they went so far back in time for number 3 because they didn't go nearly as far forward. But I think it is kind of cool to show the opposite, but they kind of had already done that in the original movie when they went back to the 50s to then go forward 30 years. They kind of already done that, but I get it.
Yeah. And so now that we're talking about it, obviously not right now. We've already watched them all this week. I think sometime in the next couple of years, I would like to sit down and watch all 3 back to back when we don't have children around and we actually have however many hours to just sit and watch movies.
And we have lots of coffee.
Yes. Okay. And then my last note is about the director, Bob Zemeckis, and the writer and the guy. And, I thought it was interesting because I was looking at his Wikipedia site because I knew he was involved in this, and like the awards section, it had 2 movies underneath it, and it was Back to the Future and Forrest Gump. And I was like, oh, our 2 highest rated Culture Night movies are all thanks to this guy. And then I was scrolling through his full like credits section, and he also worked on Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So he's got 3 of our Culture Night movies. Yeah. And I also thought it was interesting that I noted when we were watching the sequel, you can see Roger Rabbit in the window. And I was like, oh, it's Roger Rabbit. But I didn't realize that Bob Zemeckis worked on that. And so I was like, oh, they probably put that in there because it had probably just come out and they were just trying to promote it a little bit more and having that like a little bit of crossover. So I knew Bob Zemeckis had directed a couple, or at least one other besides Forrest Gump, but I couldn't remember which one it was. And it was not Back to the Future, Roger Rabbit. So that wraps up my notes.
I have one more, and that is for number 2, was apparently not originally going to be revisiting the 1950s and kind of having basically 2 simultaneous time travelers in all that whole storyline. Originally, they were going to go back to the 1960s, and they kind of some of the things they were planning to do there, they actually ended up carrying into number 2 and 3 as is. Like rather, Marty was basically supposed to get dressed up and go back to the 60s, like dressed up like a hippie and like not really be able to blend in, similar to when they dressed him up as a Westerner and sent him back. A couple things like that, but I'm really glad they changed it because they originally didn't have the idea of the 2 simultaneous like tellings of the stories from 2 different perspectives as he's traveling back. And I think they're probably, I assume, one of the first to really ever try to do that in a story, especially not in a movie where they've have so much going on. And I think that really adds to like the intensity and just the stress of the movie when you realize like not only are they trying to fix their timeline or their story, but they also don't want to mess with the timeline they just fixed. So there's like so much going on there. It's so cool then seeing like two versions of the same scene, you're having to like retape those or re-record those and do all that. I think it's adds such another dimension to the movie itself that I'm so glad they did that, because I think if it was just going back to the 60s and been a slightly different story, it'd be pretty forgettable. But with this, like number 2 is such a fun ride because of everything going on with that.
Yeah. The more I was reading into stuff today, and the more like that we watch the sequels, and the more I think about it all as a whole, it is just so well done. And just round of applause to everybody, because I really enjoyed it.
So now I think we can close the chapter on Back to the Future.
Yes. No more going back to the future. And now it's time to jump into what are we watching tonight?
Tonight, we are watching Jurassic Park from 1994. It is rated PG-13.
Okay, oops. We recorded last week's podcast and reported that Jurassic Park came out in 1994, and that's just my fault. I didn't fact check myself. I had it listed somewhere that it was 1994, and we just committed with it. And then when we were going through and watching it back for the edit, we realized we'd made a mistake. So we are here to go back in time again, but this time to the correct year.
Don't feel too bad. Off by 1 mistakes are the 2 most common mistakes in all of computer science.
Sure. Do we need a time machine?
Sure. Let's go back in our time machine back to 1993, where the top 3 movies released that year were Jurassic Park.
There we go.
Grossing $338 million. The Fugitive grossing $183 million. You can go back to season 2. One. We watched that. And The Firm grossing $158 million. The top 3 songs released that year were I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston. Whoop, there it is by Tag Team, and Can't Help Falling in Love by UB40.
So that's back in time to the correct year. And now we will send you back to the episode where we talk about the rest of the movie.
Back to the future, back to Jurassic Park.
It's a confusing season for this to be happening. But anyways, back to Jurassic Park.
Back to Jurassic Park. Have you seen it before?
Have I seen it with like a functional memory? No. I vaguely feel like my parents tried to watch it with me on VHS, not in 1994.
So technically, yes.
My mom was trying to tell me that they took me. She was like, I think we saw it in theaters. And I was like, I was 3 years old. I absolutely did not go see this in theaters.
A PG-13 movie about dinosaurs. 3-year-old you.
3-year-old little girl.
Screamed. No. Everyone's eardrums would have been pierced.
I was like, yeah, you definitely saw that without me. But I feel like we watch it at some point at home. I don't think we watched the whole thing. Or if I did, I was like watching it behind my eyes my hands because it was not for me. So I feel like I know some scenes, but I don't really know a whole lot about the premise. Have you seen it before?
Spoiler alert, there are dinosaurs. Yes, I have seen it before several times. I watched Jurassic Park 2 more than 1 because we had it on VHS, but I still...
That seems to be the theme with you.
Yeah.
Terminator 2, Jurassic Park 2.
This to me seems... I view it more as like a prequel because I grew up watching the VHS that we had so many times that this one I didn't watch until later and be like, oh, that's that reference and kind of getting that. So, yes, I have seen it. And what I know about this movie without giving away spoilers is that this was the first Dolby surround sound movie. And so it is just known for the iconic bass and the surround sound, everything kind of, building up such an immersive experience that the reason why I've not made you watch this movie up to this point.
When did we start trying to watch this movie?
2015.
So we're going on 9 years of trying to watch this movie. 2015.
And in the apartment that we were living in then, the neighbors did not appreciate the surround sound noise that we had there, even though it was afternoon on a Saturday. And so we had to stop watching it midway through because I was not about to watch this on just TV speakers.
He was like, we will not watch this on the television speakers, and turn it off. And we have not had sufficient speakers in our home for 9 years. So now I can finally watch this movie.
So you better appreciate it.
I better. I really feel like you're setting yourself up for disappointment because I'm not going to appreciate it as much as you. But I will appreciate the effort you went through to get me here.
Yes. So that is the big thing there. And I think obviously
I know dinosaurs.
So yeah, let's jump into it and see if it's as good as I've led you to believe.
Oh God. Again, setting yourself up for failure. Anyways, Jurassic Park. Cheers.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. I'm just going to go ahead and start this by saying if the audio for me is off, it's because my mic stand or mic or some situation is broken, so I have to hold my mic instead of have it on the stand, and it's just...
It is what it is.
It is what it is. I would also like to second this by saying that it is 11:13 p.m. Mm-hmm. And so we just watched a 2-hour movie and just...
Got a late start.
Bear with us.
All right, so let's hop into the wine scale first and foremost. So our wine scale is a 0 to 10 scale. However, it is heavily weighted, given that all the wines we drink on this show are very good wines. So a low score does not mean that it is a bad wine, because, as I said, all the wines we drink are very good wines. That being said, I'm going to rate this one an 8.0.
Okay. So I went back and forth between something in the high 4s to the low 7s for this whole movie. And I was like, this is so dumb. How can a wine have such a broad range? And then I was about to do like a 6.2, and then I settled on a 4.7. So I think I'm going to stick with 4.7. I thought it was great, but like, I don't know. Sorry, you said 8 point something?
8.0. I think the issue is it's a good wine. It's a situational wine. It's not an everyday drinking wine. I think it's...
You love situational wines.
Yeah. I mean, most good wines are, meaning that like, it's not just going to be something you just have 100 bottles of. That's the only wine you drink or anything like that. And it's good for every occasion. This, I honestly feel like where we drank it was where it is best consumed.
For podcasting Jurassic Park.
Right. For watching it, sitting down, just drinking a bottle of wine with a good movie. I think some wines pair really well with certain foods, or some are really good, like easy drinking wines, or, pre-gaming wines, or just all around like casual conversational wines. This one, I think, is you're not sitting there chit-chatting. You are using it to enhance the experience of whatever you are like consuming.
I can appreciate that. I think the things that kept like knocking it back for me was that it is a very like sweet, jammy, fruity wine. And I really prefer, as I said last week, the earthier tones. So that's personally why I kept knocking it back. I did enjoy it, and I did think it was very good, and I do really love Zinfandel. But at the end...
It was more just that I kept forgetting about it, and I would refill, and I would take another like big first sip of that next glass and be like, wow, this actually has a lot going on. It's not just a one and done or a single note wine. There was a couple little, flavors attacking each other, different directions. Yeah. It's kind of like a velociraptor, you think you know where it's coming from, but
and look at you bringing it full circle.
So
with that,
I think that's our transition to move into the movie rating out of 10. The movie rating is a bit different than our wine scale because it is just very, very different between the two of us and just subjective for the most part. I'll let you go first.
Okay. I will give it a 6.2.
I'm going to give it an 8.3.
And I think my 6.2 has an asterisk of I'm a girl, and it's not really my jam, but I appreciate its bigger cultural impact and like movie impact with the sound and like all that stuff. I see that, but not for me.
Yeah. I mean, just thinking of like how I usually rate these things for rewatch, like how much did I enjoy it, rewatchability / like quotability, and like overall impact on pop culture. And I think I feel like for the most part, it checks all the boxes, except I don't know how likely I am to just sit there and watch the whole thing. It is a whole lot, and there are a lot of different aspects to it. Like I love a lot of the key scenes from it, but the whole thing is a lot to just casually consume over and over again. I don't know. I don't know what is keeping me from giving it a higher score than that. Because I feel like there were a lot of like, I guess it's not too terribly quotey. There's a couple of things that I think I've latched onto from it for the most part.
I think it's like, I appreciate all of the parts of it, but it is a movie where you have to, like, if you're watching the whole thing start to finish, you are committing to like being like, and that is not what everybody wants in an everyday movie all the time.
Yeah. But look at the different parts, the later parts of it. I think it is informed so much of how everyone thinks of dinosaurs nowadays and pictures them and visualizes them and gave people the ability to see what was in their imagination or what like the books have portrayed a real life, in quotes, dinosaur. And I think the reason it gets a lower score for me than something like Back to the Future, what else are we good? Star Wars,
Forrest Gump,
some of those other high rated ones, is that I think it's just so niche for the most part. Like dinosaurs is a very
I mean,
like narrow topic versus things like just overall day-to-day pop culture references, lifestyle, even just space. I think people like think more about than they do just dinosaurs, to be honest. I think that's kind of the drawback there.
Yep, I see that.
Just it's narrow focus.
Just, I don't know. And maybe that's exactly why I'm like, well, dinosaurs are just not for me.
Mm-hmm. At one point, they were everything to me. And for a lot of boys, I think they are everything for them. But
yes,
you know.
I have experienced the dinosaur land with you in Disney World.
Mm-hmm.
It was your thing. It was. I don't think there has ever been a moment where I was like, dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
with the exception that Triceratops sounds kind of like my name. That is the extent of my interest in dinosaurs.
Not vain at all. Not vain.
Shut up.
I think that the dinosaur thing is something I don't think about 99% of the time, but then I go somewhere like Dinosaur Land in Animal Kingdom at Disney World, and suddenly it's like something I can't help it. It's deep.
You
in the
transformed
DNA.
in front of my eyes. I was like, oh, well, we went from like normal human to whoop.
Yeah, just you suddenly get in there and you're like, if I had gone to the real Jurassic Park and it wasn't quite as sketchy, scary, dangerous, I feel like I would have been in heaven and it would have been amazing.
Mm-hmm. All right, why don't you give us a movie description?
A scientist entrepreneur is trying to create a adventure park based on dinosaurs. He cuts a lot of corners and in regards to safety, and it leads to some of the dinosaurs escaping, which causes a whole lot of danger and havoc for those in the park who were sent there to rate whether or not the project itself was feasible or safe.
I think the phrase cutting corners was the best phrase you could have come up with for that description. Well done. Okay, so the description, according to the TV, which I'm reading from my phone because I can't see the TV, is a wealthy entrepreneur. Were those your...
I think I said scientist entrepreneur, but wealthy, yeah.
A wealthy entrepreneur secretly creates a theme park featuring living dinosaurs drawn from prehistoric DNA. Before opening day, he invites a team of experts and his 2 eager grandchildren to experience the park and help calm anxious investors. However, the park is anything but amusing as the security systems go offline and the dinosaurs escape.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. We watched the same movie.
I think that this is one of the better one.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've had overall better descriptions.
This one also didn't reference any specific names, so it didn't give them any
no adjectives,
absurd adjectives for the names.
Yes, I like this one.
Mm-hmm.
Gives a good succinct where you're like, I want to know what. Like what fill in the blank of all of these like mysterious things they're saying.
So like it's less about the characters, more about the dinosaurs and the overall park. Mm-hmm. Like some movies where it's very much about like Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. Was the movie what you expected?
Absolutely, 100%. We talked too long in the before show for me to really give my true thoughts and feelings about what I knew and what I expected. Mm-hmm. I remembered the whole scene. I guess I've seen enough or like through our experiences. Was it Disney or Universal? Who has the Jurassic Park? We went to both.
The Jurassic Park one is at Universal.
Okay.
The
Dinosaur Land is in Disney World. I knew that there was a Dinosaur Land in Disney World, but I couldn't remember if like the car and the thing where we have the picture, which if you want to see a picture of us with the dinosaur from Universal Studios, we will post it on our Instagram for all to see. So like I knew we'd been there and like seen some of that stuff, but I remembered the car scene where the lawyer gets eaten. Like I've seen that scene before, and I don't know if that's how far we made it when we watched the movie before.
We did not make it that far.
I didn't think we made it that far. I've definitely seen that before, so I knew that was coming. You know something's gonna happen if someone is that cocky. Know shit's gonna go down. Yeah,
otherwise, it'd be a very boring movie.
It is exactly what I expected. I mean, I don't know how it's different from that, given the term Jurassic Park in the first like 5 minutes of setting it up.
I mean, watching it as a kid, you don't really care about all the background for it and the politics and the insurance and investors and all those kind of things. You're just in there being like, oh my God, dinosaurs. Oh my God, T-Rex. Oh my God, Velociraptor. Like you care less about that. Like going back and rewatching it later, I picked up on a little bit more of that, and coming back now, really sitting down and focusing on it. And just also full disclosure, some of the things I've read about over the past several years about this movie, really like keying in on those things. It's a much more nuanced story than you first pick up on as a kid watching it, where all you care about is the dinosaurs. That I would say like, yes, is what I expected, because I know the overall storyline, but every time I go back and watch it and I see more of the underlying like character motivations and the other like plot lines essentially in place, it expands my appreciation for the movie and all the various like actual thought they put into making the movie work beyond just like, oh my God, dinosaurs, blockbuster. And
I mean, I will say, watching it as an adult, I did not care at all about the dinosaurs. Didn't want to see those. I was exclusively like, oh man, he reminds me of certain politicians and this blah blah blah, like this kind of character. Like I was so focused more on the characters, until you said this, I didn't really realize that is all that I took from it. I couldn't tell the dinosaurs apart. I do know what a triceratops looks like, but like I was not focused on the dinosaurs at all. I was very much on plotline, character development, motivation, all that stuff. So it's interesting. I mean, and it makes sense as a kid. You're not focused on, you don't care about what adults are doing.
You just kind of like want them to get want the dinosaurs to win, but not want the dinosaurs to win at the same time. It's very conflicting.
How well did it age?
I thought very well. There were some things that I don't know if they doctored up with the CGI at all, but
I mean, I thought it looked good.
There are a couple of times
1994.
Where I could tell it was a green screen, but I had to really be looking to try to like not be immersed in some of the aspects of it.
There was nothing blatant like some of the other stuff that we've seen.
Right, and I think a lot of the reason why it aged so well is they relied less on full-on CGI, especially for the close-ups and the actual like interactive parts of it. They use puppets as opposed to just CGI, which I think is something that's going to age a little bit better if they pull it off well, and also better than like stop motion, like we saw in Terminator. Some of those things can.
We did also jump forward a full decade. I mean, 9 years from Back to the Future, and Back to the Future wasn't even that like CGI heavy. That like we have gone forward a big jump from our sci-fi journey, but overall they did a really good job. One
thing I do want to deep dive at least or look into for next week is
snack on
that from Fact Snacks is I believe I heard that originally the plan was to go full CGI for the dinosaurs, and someone pushed back on that and wanted to use some of the puppets for the T-Rex specifically. And I think that ended up being like a major win for the movie, and I think added to that effect. But I'll look into that a bit more for next week in the pre-show. Could the movie be made today? Yeah, and they're still making Jurassic World and other spin-offs for that. So yeah, I
think the theme of sci-fi season is almost every single one of them has a sequel, except for E.T. and 2001: A Space Odyssey. So 4 of the 6 so far.
You're kind of like creating new worlds. It's pretty easy to find some space to make a sequel in a lot of these. Did they say the title of the movie in the movie? For sure.
Did they put the actual like graphic of the movie poster in the movie? Yes.
All over the place. Could not miss that. Does the title fit the movie?
Yes.
Yeah. What else could you call it besides like Dinosaur Park?
Yeah. Like Dinosaur Land.
Yeah. No. Jurassic Park totally fits. Although not all the dinosaurs were from the Jurassic era. It is the name of the park in the movie, so sure, fits it.
Okay, Ross. Were there any actors that went on to do bigger things?
A couple.
I mean, it's a pretty like decent. I mean, not like crazy.
I think this was fairly early on in Samuel L. Jackson's career.
He looked pretty young.
Yeah, I think he may have done Pulp Fiction, or it was right around this time, and I think that was what kind of catapulted his career. So I think he was a big one. Jeff Goldblum was in it. I think he'd probably done The Fly and a couple other things before that. And I don't know if this was early on in his career. The actor that played Newman from Seinfeld,
Wayne
Knight, he was in a whole lot of things in the 90s. I feel like this was kind of in his prime time for acting and things.
Definitely.
Played Nedry in this. He was a big guy.
Laura Dern. She's been in a lot of things. I can't name it specifically, but I definitely recognize her face. The Fly was before we started Culture Night, right?
Yes,
when we watched it.
That was, yeah.
That was a movie experience like no other.
Yeah, very odd movie. Would be a great one if we were to do like a Halloween or horror themed season. I don't think it's high on your list though.
It's not. I mean, I've been there, seen that. Do I need to watch it again? Nope. What impact do you think this movie had on pop culture? Zero, none, not any. It's never.
Like I referenced before, this is kind of the like epitome of dinosaurs. Someone thinks about dinosaurs, they think about Jurassic Park. It just immediately comes to mind there. How people picture dinosaurs. There's so many various things that I think the quotability less so, and you're not gonna really see this impact of it, like people replicating a lot of these things in other movies because it is such a narrow thing. But I think for the most part, just dinosaurs in Jurassic Park are fairly synonymous today.
100%. Also, I can't help but thinking like I am a big Friends fan. So the whole movie I'm like thinking about Ross Geller, as I've already called you Ross. But like I just now am processing that like Friends was already on when this came out. So it's not like like some like, oh, they're referencing Jurassic Park that came out way before this. Like they are living in the Jurassic Park era. And I'm sure Ross was like, I'm sure I'll look into that more.
I'm surprised there wasn't like a storyline there, but when like this or Jurassic Park 2 came out and Friends for Ross to like have freaked out about
there's
inaccuracies.
I mean, there's definitely, I want to say there's a storyline about someone or him saying like Jurassic Park could happen or like it couldn't happen. And I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but I was trying to pinpoint that during the movie because I know that there was some tie in there, but that's my big tie into dinosaurs is Ross Geller.
If there's a tie in there, we will find that for some Fact Snacks next week.
Yes, I feel cultured after watching it. I was reading your mind.
I'm glad that you feel cultured because I was afraid you were going to be like, yeah, I mean, I kind of knew about it. Like it was whatever, but.
I mean, I think it's very rare that I don't feel cultured because most of the movies we're choosing are culturally significant movies. And I mean, do I love it? And do I want to watch it again? No. I appreciate the art of it. I appreciate especially a lot of the CGI puppetry, all of the stuff that went into making it. I understand that it has a big impact on pop culture and knowing a part of it, you can't help but feel cultured, but like not for me.
I think you probably also feel more cultured thinking about the less of the dinosaur aspect of it and more of like the filmmaking and the like meta aspects of it.
I want to say you went first for notes last week. Would you like me to go first? Or do you really want to go first?
No, you can go first.
Okay. So my first note is fossils. So they're in Montana. Brushing away fossils. And I just want to go back to, again, I think it's the Blazing Saddles episode where I thought quicksand was going to be a big part of my life. I also thought like just stumbling upon fossils was going to be a really big part of my life.
You just go around, there's some dirt and you look down and you're like, oh my God,
you get a brush
fossil.
And you brush it off and you're like, oh my God, I found a fossil.
I found a trilobite and here's my fossil. And I'm just going to go put it in my collection of other fossils that I found this week.
And I just feel like adults lie to us and they were like, you're going to find a lot of these fossils in your lifetime. Here's how to preserve them so that you can keep them. Nope. I have not one time ever stumbled upon a fossil.
You're going to find a perfectly preserved fossil of a full-on dinosaur that just in the dirt.
Or a leaf or like whatever. I mean, you're going to find fossils everywhere.
Yep.
Nope.
Something that I think very few people ever find, especially anymore.
Exactly. So just saying, I just feel like I was misled as a child. My next note is, how can you tell all the shapes of the bones? They're looking at this dusty computer in the middle of the desert, and it's like 4 pixels.
Panasonic TV.
And he's like, well, look at the curve of this bone. And like, obviously this is this. And I'm like, obviously what? Like, I don't know.
Talking about like how they hunted, all these things he's getting from looking at those bones. Like,
and I'm like, can you even see the bones? Like I can vaguely see the outline of this animal. I don't know that I can see actual bones.
Somebody like blew up a bomb thing nearby that rattled the earth that this thing picked up on the seismograph that it projected onto it. Like you said, a 4 pixel TV. And they're like, yep. Dinosaur.
I'm just saying it doesn't track. All right. My next note is the branding kills me. That they just go. I think it'd be different if the Jurassic Park for the theme park logo wasn't the logo for the movie too. But it almost feels like that like meta Spaceballs thing where they're branding the movie within the movie. And I don't know. I just had a hard time taking it seriously because like I was just getting that like, oh, we're kind of making fun of ourselves here when they obviously used the logo that they did for the movie because they were branding this theme park. So like, I understand all of that, but being so far removed from it, it just feels silly.
I think I have 2 thoughts on that. One is that I think they were really pushing on the like Disney aspect of it. And this kind of being like a Disney World thing. And there's like some mentions to it in it with the Pirates of the Caribbean too, which we'll get to in a second. I think also this movie also probably took a lot of money to make and do all the CGI and puppetry and just overall making of it, that I wonder if part of the pitch was like, hey, we're going to make this movie. It's going to cost a whole lot of money, but the merchandising, we're going to make all that money back on just Jurassic Park themed stuff we can sell after the movie is made.
I mean, well, I will say this just leads right into my next note of theme park lol. I don't think I fully realized that they were really going all in on theme park. I thought it was going to be more of like a like scientific experiment type place. But then they're like sitting on the ride and they're doing the like carousel of progress type circular stage situation. And then, I mean, they're in that business meeting and talking about, oh, like we can charge 10,000 or like 2,000 or 10,000 and building on. And he's like, and then what's his name? John was like, I want everybody to be able to attend. And I do truly feel like that would be Walt Disney still. He like the fact that we are spending and charging so much money to go to Walt Disney World right now is absurd. And I feel like Walt Disney would be pissed about that. And like that very much felt like, all the people who are in charge of Disney now are like, we can charge $10,000 a day to go to Disney World and people will come because they will. But that's not the point of this. And that was my big, like, we're ruining things.
Yeah. I can definitely see that they were trying to play on the Walt Disney vibes there with the whole like visionary aspect of it, but then also for the people. I want everyone to come here and enjoy this and see things and touch things and interact with them.
Especially because Walt was so big on like Epcot, this world of the future. And like, I mean, his vision in 1950s and 60s was, we're going to be in space and we're going to be doing all this stuff and it's going to be so revolutionary and innovative and creative. And what we're seeing from these scientific movies of where they thought we would be today are not so true now. But he wanted everybody to be able to experience that. I mean, not everybody could go to space, but everybody could come to Disneyland. And like, not everybody was around when the dinosaurs were around, but like nobody was around when the dinosaurs were around. But like, you can come and you can experience this. Like, I feel like there is, such a thing where capitalism is just ruining everything.
Yeah, there's extremes to everything.
So, anyways, but I did feel like that was like a really interesting takeaway. Again, I was not there for the dinosaurs. I was there for all of this crazy stuff. My next note is Dr. Henry Wu was also, Frank. From Father of the Bride.
He looks familiar. I was trying to place where he was from. That totally makes sense given the time period this was.
No, Frank is Martin Short. Weinstein or something, his assistant. He's in, I hate that I can't think of his name off the top of my head, and I even looked him up that I should have written it down, but I was just so excited. I was like, oh, he's from Father of the Bride. I knew, like, the second his voice, they didn't even show his face, I was like, I know who that is. I know exactly who that is.
Okay, yeah, he looks so familiar, but I could not place it.
We've got a Father of the Bride soon. This is such a good movie. So it was like, obviously that's such a different role than Father of the Bride, so it was really interesting seeing like Mr. Scientist. My next note is some deep shit is just being dropped here with all of the like meta thoughts of Jeff Goldblum's character. I was just like, man.
That's like where the quotability of this movie comes from. Like your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they didn't stop to think if they should. Just some great lines that he had there.
I mean, I feel like, I was paying like 98% attention, but like every once in a while, I'm looking up to see if this guy's in Father of the Bride. And then I zone back in and he's dropping some truth bombs like this. And I'm like, damn, okay. And also on the note of Jeff Goldblum, my next note is he plays an excellent asshole. Like he just nails that guy where like he's saying what everybody's thinking,
but you still just want to smack him.
But you just want to just like punch him right in the face. And well done on your acting there. And my next note is I love Dr. Sattler, the woman Ellie or Elle, whatever her name was. Just like she had great facial acting because I mean I feel like they like, oh, I don't like kids, blah, blah, blah. And then she's in the background, like subtly like making eyes at the camera or at the kids or him. And I feel like she played that character really well. And I just love that kind of like smart alecky woman. I don't know. I thought she was great.
Speaking of the facial acting, I think the little girl, Lex, I think what she reminds me of is the actress that plays Aleda in the later seasons of For All Mankind.
Okay, I can see
after, just the way that kind of.
In case you didn't know, we love that show.
And like the way that you could tell there's like intensity and just like total fear behind her eyes and a lot of those things. The way she was acting, I could see the same thing in Aleda from For All Mankind.
I see that because we talk about her facial acting. We're really big into facial acting.
It's underrated skill.
But that my second to last note is Lex has the best scared face. Like you believe she is scared shitless.
Yeah, petrified completely.
And for so long, I thought it really early on and I just kept putting off writing it down, but then she just kept being more scared and I was like, she crushes it. And just like the way she like breathes and her eyes react, like very well done. My next note is the water cups in the cars. Who just carries around open cups in their car? I mean, like occasionally I've like brought a cup I was still drinking in the car with me, but these are very short glasses that are pretty full that they're driving on these like all-terrain roads with. I mean, I guess they were kind of on that like track a little bit, but like water bottles. They weren't
sliding on the track though. Yeah, it was open water. Yeah. A water bottle could have done the exact same effect.
Because like when Jeff Goldblum picks it up to do the like water on her hand, I was like, that's dumb. Why is there a water cup? And then all of a sudden you see and I know it was probably so you can see the water or the the vibrations. but it just doesn't track.
Yeah.
Especially I understand why they did it from like a storytelling standpoint, but
only like in a weird like Costa Rica type place. And I feel like just having open water cups at all is mosquitoes.
Water bottle. And you'd just be probably drinking like already water that is safe to drink from a water bottle. Just kind of odd. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really good point. It made me mad every time I saw the cup. I'm like, just get a water bottle. Okay. Anyways, I also just didn't really understand why his grandchildren were there.
I guess he was trying to prove to the people that it's so safe. Like he was trusting to have his kids there.
But my problem is that you started that sentence with, I guess. It was never, I felt like so much of this movie was just like, you're assuming a lot of things. And I think that was also part of my, like, I had a hard time getting into it because, I mean, it was like a quick one-liner of who this person is, not a, like, let me understand who and why and this character's here.
Hammered into you at least.
That, I mean, all of a sudden it was like a third of the way of the movie. And I'm like, but also, like, why are these children here? Where are their parents? I understand that they're his grandchildren, but like, I kept
wondering where the parents are. Like, did something happen to them? Yeah. Is he trying to lose them too? Like, what is going on?
I don't know.
Does he have an insurance policy out against them?
Maybe. They should make a Jurassic Park 2. Oh, I'm so funny. Okay. Anyways, so that just made me mad. And then I already talked about her scared face, but my last note is ding. We have another Culture Night crossover reference. It was more so to the ride that inspired the movie, but Jeff Goldblum's character does mention Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland, and we watched Pirates of the Caribbean in season 1, episode 15.
Last episode of that season.
Yeah, I think it was 15 because 16 was the recap episode. So we did watch that. If you want to go back and watch that movie.
15 episodes in season 1. Wow.
Because we were just powering through. We didn't have any direction, and then
we were just delirious having a newborn.
We had a very small baby. We're so stupid. Hey, but here we are having fun.
Still crushing through.
Yeah. So that wraps up my notes. But I was just shocked that I had so many things to say, and I honestly I think there was probably like 4 or 5 more things where I was like, I could write this down, and then something else would happen, and
I just stopped myself because I felt like I was writing too many notes that I'm like, we'll just let these things go.
Yes. And if it's that important, we'll bring it up in the pre-show next week for our fact snacks. On to you.
My first note was that this movie takes place obviously in a time back when you could fly with a whole can of shaving cream, and that was not going to alarm TSA.
I'm shocked I didn't pick up on that. That's
because big old can of Barbasol with like this storage thing for embryos that he was going to ride with to smuggle the dinosaur DNA out of there. And I'm like, but TSA is going to be like, that's too large that's not an airplane size bottle of shaving cream. And
I didn't pick up on that. I'm mad. But I also, back to that, like they didn't really set any of that up. Like I didn't know that he worked for the Jurassic Park yet. Like I feel like they could have explained more before going into this, like, oh, we're going to sneak embryos in. I don't know. I think
it kind of comes out later of like why he's doing it. Like I think you're then supposed to be surprised that he's there. And then it turns out, he's got financial issues, and they're all, I guess, but John Hammond is mad. Like, why are you, it's not my fault that you've got financial issues, whatever, because he wants more money. That I think that's kind of like showing that he has a motive. But
I also think that goes back to like, it's mostly about the dinosaurs, because like we also, every time we've talked about a character, we're like, I think their name was, because they don't do enough to like set up these characters, and like you're invested in them from like a visual standpoint, and like they're humans. You don't want them to be eaten by the dinosaurs, but like I really couldn't tell you a single person's name except that
Malcolm?
I looked up the girl's name, Dr. Sattler, so that I could write it down in my notes. Like I looked up on Wikipedia what her character's name was, because I didn't know while watching the movie that it was so focused on the dinosaurs, which I appreciate because that's what this movie is known for.
Right.
But as like an actual plot line, you have to watch it many times before you can pick up on the nuances and stuff.
Right. My next note was they're driving around in these Jeeps. They could just get to the island. Do they not notice all the dinosaurs until that last second? Because they're riding around. This gigantic brontosaurus or whatever it is, like walking around, you're going to hear or feel that. I get you're in a Jeep. Then they finally see it, and they're not.
Your water cups aren't rattling the second you see that,
right? But then they don't look around. It's like they see one, they see more, then they see more. Like over the course of a couple of minutes, I think once I saw one, I'd be like, "Oh my god, where the hell are we?" And be looking all around for that.
I would be like, "Where the hell is the helicopter?" Because I'm getting out of here.
Because I'm like, these people are so oblivious. Like any velociraptor wouldn't even have to try to surround them. They're just gonna lock into one thing and just be like, I'm gonna focus on this until I'm forced to focus on anything else. I guess my next note was the suit, jacket, and shorts look. I didn't.
That was another thing I could have written down.
I didn't fully understand that. I get that it's hot there and you don't want to wear like a full on suit, but also why are you wearing like a blazer type suit thing? I guess,
in Costa Rica.
Right.
Or off of Costa Rica, whatever.
He just looked so goofy and silly, especially with his like ultra hairy legs.
I mean, I was going to say, wasn't my, like, we're watching it and I was like, why is that very hairy leg there? And then I realized, oh, is he wearing pants? Okay, yes, he has shorts on with his blazer. He has on a short suit.
It's like they could have put him in like some like a button down or something with a tie and like had the sleeves all rolled up. Just the whole like suit thing looked goofy as hell.
Yep.
My next note was the seat belts. I don't know if you caught the reference to that. When they're in the helicopter and they're trying to land, he has like two of the female ends and he can't get them to connect. So he ties them together and that's life finding a way. I can't claim full credit for that because it's something that I had read about online, but I picked it up when we were watching that scene. Because then
Thank you for admitting that you didn't pick it up.
Then later they talk about all the animals there are females. All they had were the female clips for the seatbelt, but then out of necessity,
damn.
Yeah. Some of those things are very like you see it later and you're like, shit, that's so smart.
And again, that's what this whole like podcast and movie watching experience to me is like. People are so intentional with the things that they do. And it is incredible how much time and effort that people put into these movies that we just like sit around and munch on popcorn and like sometimes casually watch, sometimes watch really focused, but like.
And that's why it's so frustrating sometimes when there's a way that someone could do something better, but they were so lazy with how they wrote the script or how they, acted in that one scene where I'm like, oh man, but we see how cool it is when someone actually is so intentional and so smart and like puts a forethought or has a reference back to something because they did it that way, that when you see someone not do it, you're like, missed opportunity in a movie. Like totally ruins it. And
it like when you see it done really well, you're like, and this is why we call it an art. And like a lot of times you think of like, oh, art, haha. But like it is an art to what they are doing. It is incredible. Yeah. When they do it well, it is done so immaculately.
My next note being that this was another amazing sci-fi soundtrack. I vividly remember back in middle school, we would have a couple like performances throughout the year where we would have a whole bunch of like songs or numbers that we would go through. And I remember in probably 7th or 8th grade, we were playing through this like medley to figure out what our songs basically that we were going to be playing for our next performance were going to be. And one of them was a medley of a bunch of like iconic soundtracks. And it didn't say like what soundtracks or what themes were in it. And so we're just playing along. It's our teacher just had us basically do a rough run through. So obviously we're missing a whole lot of notes. We're not quite getting there. But I vividly remember we're playing through and we're trying to like make sense of what this song is. Just everyone, it's, the whole band playing through. And when this hits the theme for Jurassic Park, it's like I'm sitting there on my trumpet just being like, oh my God, like just the excitement of the power you feel when you're just like sitting there, the trumpet playing the melody through that, and it just kind of comes out of this mess that we're all playing. It comes really clear to the do 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 do. This, oh man, I'll like carry that forever. It was just so cool.
I'm so happy for you that you had that experience.
It was just such a great, simple but awesome theme for
it is.
A movie.
It is very simple, but I think that again, it's not about the soundtrack here. It's about the dinosaurs.
Yeah, it just such conveys that like sense of like wonder and excitement there.
Wonder, 100%.
But like we talked about before, just amazing soundtracks we've had for this sci-fi season. Just
it's nuts.
One after the other. My next note was LOL VR displays in 1994 when they're talking about how they're trying to sequence the DNA for these dinosaurs and they've got the virtual reality thing. And I'm like, that seems so freaking impractical. Like nowadays with Apple trying to make this Apple Vision Pro thing that like it's much more of a toy than an actual practical thing. And they're trying to convince us that the 1994 virtual reality headset this guy has was going to help him sequence the genes versus being like some scientists who'd be like, dude, we had a huge budget. Let's convince them that we need some VR stuff because why not? It's a cool toy. No way that was helping them. We mentioned Samuel L. Jackson being in the movie. Next up was that did the tropical storm just like sneak up on them? Because they mentioned it like so casually, like, oh, there's a tropical storm coming through.
And they're out on the Jeeps in the sun looking at this Triceratops that's ill. Also, did we ever find out what happened to the Triceratops? Nope.
I don't think so.
And we're just like so concerned, blah, blah. And then it's like, we have to get on the boats right now. Get back in the car. Like, alert, alert, alert.
Well, it seemed like the scientists were already kind of like planning to like get out and like get off the island.
From the second they get there. But last boat leaving at 1900 hours.
But then they brought other people in. They were just like, oh yeah, go casual. It's sunny. Like what could go wrong?
And that's why I didn't like it, because I was frustrated the whole time. It's like, that's why I also don't like scary movies, because everybody just does stupid things. Like scary movies are not like scary. It's just a bunch of people doing stupid things. That like this was like, okay, well, they're telling everybody to leave at this certain time. So everybody's getting out. But like, oh, let's just bring these investors in and just make sure that's fine. No, stupid.
So I want to look into the whole Triceratops thing, but I think it's either one of two things. One is that maybe the Triceratops was getting pregnant, and that's why it was like freaking out and getting weird.
But it happens every 6 weeks.
Which is why that's why I don't know what the...
I thought it was something like menstrual cycle, like like being a female reproductive system, something like that.
So I don't know if it was something like that because it was so cyclical, but then also she talked about the vegetation, and I don't know if it's because it was trying to point out Dr. Hammond's like lack of attention to detail of having like vegetation around there that was not going to work with whatever animals and dinosaurs.
And that's what I thought it was at first, but then she looked and she's like, well, this isn't in there, blah, blah, blah. That I was like, okay, then it's not that, it must be something else.
Right.
And then I'm like, I mean, I don't really want to watch the sequels.
I would
but I'm like, is this something that like comes up again in future movies? But it seems like probably
I don't
not.
necessarily think so from what I remember, but I think I do want to look into that and figure out exactly why. Next note, the one that pissed me off the most throughout the whole movie is why do they keep leaving doors open? Okay, so Nedry gets out of the Jeep.
For people who aren't watching, I'm just shaking my head because I was so frustrated.
It's pouring down rain, and he just leaves his Jeep door open to run out and go do these things. Meanwhile, Dinosaur gets in there. She's running later. What's her face?
Dr. Sattler.
Dr. Sadler is running through to restart the generator or whatever. She runs through and she's leaving every like door open. Like it'd be very easy to shut these things.
But same thing back to the Jeep guy. I don't know. I don't know any character's name. He drives through these gates and leaves them open.
Right.
And I'm like, they closed for a reason. Close them. That made me like, I was noticeably annoyed by the leaving of the gates open as he was driving through.
The dude gets out when the T-Rex is there. The insurance, whatever investor guy gets out of there and just runs to whatever the bathroom thing is, leaves the door to the Jeep open. Like,
do you really think the little tiki hut is going to be safer than the car that you're in?
Right. I just don't get why I didn't shut the door at all.
Right. It's also raining. So like close the door.
Yeah.
In general.
It's like such an instinct thing for me. Like, oh, I'm getting out. I'm going to run. I'm going to shut the door.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many issues that could have been avoided if they just closed the damn door. Like, haven't these people ever heard of closing the goddamn door? That's what I would chime in.
And now everybody has a new song stuck in their head. And if you don't, you're probably too young to be listening to this podcast.
The next note was that Alan Grant, he was
the main guy, Alan, yes.
He was a paleontologist. And suddenly that just makes him like super knowledgeable about like how to not just like evade these dinosaurs, but like get through the forest and like climb trees and all the various other things that he was doing. Suddenly he just becomes like Indiana Jones going through all these things. I don't know.
I mean, he dressed like Indiana Jones, so.
Because I don't know about you, but my thought of paleontologist is more like a Ross Geller type. And so I just kept trying to think of myself watching this movie with David Schwimmer.
Oh my God.
Doing these things.
We've talked about remakes, but like that's the remake we all want to see.
Like
with Ross Geller in Jurassic Park. Oh my God.
I can't imagine
preferably with Phoebe.
I can't imagine him being that resourceful, like sitting there like getting the flare, running around doing these things. Like I think paleontologist, I'm like, nah.
You belong in a lab or like on a dig with dead bones, like not alive living.
He'd be much more likely to scream and run into the hut.
Oh my God. I'm totally seeing Ross with like an excellent scream. That's amazing.
Or just completely pass out.
But can we also talk about, again, you said he's a paleontologist. We're living in, say we're in the movie. It's 1994. They've studied dinosaurs. They found the bones. Sure, cool. He's like, well, they hunted like this. And then the two are going to come at you while you're looking at the one, blah, blah. How do you know that?
Right.
You have some bones. Like, I really don't understand how you can know how they hunted specifically like that, like with the way he describes it in the movie. I don't understand
I'm like,
how you know that from bones.
Pack animals, like those kind of things.
Like I can understand, like I knew this is a meat eater because of this, or I know it's like I understand those things, but like their true hunting patterns and like living patterns, There's no way that you can know that. I don't understand how people would know that.
Now, the Velociraptor was a made-up species for this movie.
I do think I knew that was not real.
But otherwise, I'm like, I don't know how anyone gathers any sort of like thoughts on this from a couple. I guess maybe there used to be a lot more fossils people could find, and there are a lot more clues then.
I don't know. I still just don't know how you trust a fossil to truly tell you the like mating and eating patterns, hunting patterns.
Cave paintings from dinosaurs that were like, here's how we hunted.
It was the caves. That's what it is.
My next note was always test your backups. These people had this, like, let's talk about
all right, Mr. Software Engineer, tell us.
There's like, you don't have a system unless you have it backed up and unless you've tested that backup. Like you don't have that thing until you've gone through those other steps. So to have this security system
that's only run by one guy,
right? Or just like they're just like, oh, we've never actually turned it back on before. I'm like, well, this seems like a pretty standard like safety procedure that you would have of like, let's test a failure here or let's test a full on reboot and those kind of things. And they talk about so much automation that they have for all this, and I get that the Nedry kind of like fucked around with some of those things, but shouldn't the automation be like, oh, when we flip this switch, everything should automatically start back up? Mm-hmm.
And also, how does Samuel L. Jackson's character like not know any of this, or like because he seemed to be pretty tech savvy in his own right? How are they not working on this together in certain extents? Obviously, he did mess with it,
reviewing some code there,
but he sets it up that like I know all of this. I've read all 2 million lines of code, or like fixed blah 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 blah. That like. How do you rely your whole safety and security on one person's code? Mm-hmm. All I know about coding is what you have told me over my last 9 years of knowing you. And that just seems stupid.
It's a pretty unsafe bus factor here, meaning if like one guy gets hit by a bus, just how unsafe your entire business is. Too much reliance on that.
Hit by a bus, eaten by a dinosaur.
Same thing, different times. The two quotes, hold on to your butts, and Clever Girl, which Clever Girl is a name of a beer that we really like from a local brewery. But hold on to your butts, I think, is a phrase that I just find myself saying a lot when things are happening.
I have been known to say it oftentimes.
And I'm glad that you finally got to see the actual source of it.
I had no idea it was from this movie.
You mentioned it a couple weeks ago, and you're like, oh, I just like love that line or that quote. And I would remember thinking like, oh, it's like 3 weeks maybe until I didn't want to ruin it for you, so I'm glad you got to appreciate that. 2 more notes. One is I got some Terminator vibes from this when leaving the area with the generator, trying to run through, and the Velociraptors kind of chasing after them. Just some of the CGI there and like the editing there seemed kind of stop motioning in a little bit, but also her having a limp and kind of walking through reminded me of like Sarah Connor running through the factory. Felt very reminiscent of that. And my final note was some 90s computer shit. So they're trying to get the door security, all systems back online.
And this 11-year-old's like, I'm a hacker. I can fix it.
She holds the mouse like she has never held a mouse before.
We both were mad about that.
It's like if someone injected my left hand with Novocaine and then told me to hold a mouse with my left hand, that's like how I would be holding it. It just seemed so unnatural and uncomfortable for a self-proclaimed hacker. I guess maybe she's used to it.
It's honestly like they had a mannequin hand and they were holding it off screen and just trying to push the mouse with it. Like it was not a human hand on there.
So maybe she's such an like advanced hacker that she only uses the keyboard, and for something like this,
she uses her mind to control them.
She's more used to the VR, which is the better way to get work done there.
Obviously.
But then also the whole thing of like to turn the security system on, you got to use this like weird video game style thing where you're like trying to navigate to a building where you click a button.
Where the girl looks at it and goes, oh, obviously this is this. I know how this works.
The most realistic part of like all of the computer system stuff that I saw was when Samuel L. Jackson went to a terminal to check whether something was online versus going to some crazy elaborate over the top user interface that would have been so unreliable, so much extra work for no reason, especially when you're over budget and way behind schedule. Just that I feel like that was just such a 90s.
It hurt your soul a little
bit. It was such a 90s thing where I was like, that is some 90s computer shit, because that's just how they portrayed every computer thing. It was like, oh, you're a kid, you're a hacker. It's computer stuff. It's gonna have this weird, crazy, over the top, custom, elaborate user interface.
But also, didn't you love the little brother who was like, you're a computer nerd? And she's like, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm a hacker. Like, love the little brother calling her out and be like, well, no, you just like know a lot about computers. Stop trying to make it cooler than it is.
Yeah.
Especially if you can't hold a mouse, you can't be cool.
Right. It killed me watching her use that mouse. I mean, a lot of it killed me, but yeah.
It was really bad.
So
all right.
that was Jurassic Park.
Wrap us up. Yep. We made it to the end. You made it to the end. Thank you for listening. And if you are enjoying this podcast and watching us go on this crazy, silly journey, if you would scroll down and rate and review on wherever you're listening to this podcast right now, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you can get notified when we post new videos. And if you're enjoying all of our content, you can also follow us on Instagram at Culture Night Pod. We'll be sharing our Jurassic World from at Universal Studios picture on there if you want to check us out over there. And
if you have any fun memories of watching Jurassic Park when it first came out, or any fun facts that we got wrong in this or that we missed, please let us know anywhere. You can.
Yes, feel free to enlighten us. Like I said, we do fact snacks. We don't do facts like 3-course meals. Yep. So if you know more, please enlighten us.
Please leave comments on the YouTube video or hit us up on our Instagram.
You can also email us at culturenightpod@gmail.com. And if you're enjoying this, we hope you will tune in next week and see where this next chapter of our sci-fi adventure will take us. So
catch you there.
Cheers.